Now, the days are finally getting longer, marginally warmer, I suppose, so naturally we all have travel on our minds. How do we fare in Ireland for our tourism offerings? Are we really a rip-off republic, or are we an enviable destination for international holidaymakers and staycationers alike? Well, I'm joined in studio by hotelier Lorraine Sweeney, by Eoghan Corry, a travel journalist, and by Adrian Cummins, CEO of the Restaurant Association of Ireland. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Pat.
First of all, something I was saying to you during the break, a pal of mine who is in the tourist business, he says the country's empty at the moment. Lorraine?
Yeah, interesting. I'm nearly glad to hear that, because we're a little bit worried during the month of April that the rates are very soft, that the tourism isn't here. I know Easter was at a different time last year, but nonetheless, this particular month is very poor from a tourism perspective. Our rooms are very quiet. And even bookings forward are not strong at this point in time. So there's a little bit of concern there.
So has price come back to bite us?
Well, obviously there are issues around price. In fact, if you were taking a break now, you'd get very reasonable prices in hotels in Dublin and around the country. Price comes back to bite us because we're an expensive country. We have a high rate of VAT, as we've discussed exhaustively. We have a high minimum wage. Both in those cases we're the third highest in Europe. So yes, it's an expensive destination. We can't do it as cheap as they can do it in Spain and Portugal and Croatia and Greece, because our cost base is so much higher here in this country. So usually what happens, the texters text in and say they could get a flight to, 40 euro flight on Ryanair and a cheap hotel and cheap food. But the reality is, if there's 9 million visitors come to Ireland every year, if you want to come to Ireland, it's not going to be as cheap as those destinations I've mentioned.
I mean, some of the comparisons that we did, this is for May the 17th to the 19th, all rooms with free cancellation include breakfast. In Ireland, the deals are total price. Abroad, the prices are per person, but include flights and also free cancellations and breakfast. So let's take the Galmont Hotel in Galway, classic king room with breakfast, free cancellation, €702, 90. A classic twin with free cancellation and breakfast, $729. You can go to Barcelona, the 4-star Gotico Hotel, a bed and breakfast, free cancellation, fly out at 8 in the morning and fly home at 8:25 in the evening, and that's $638 each for 2 people. They're the calculations that people are making.
Yes, Pat, but as I just mentioned to you there, you're going to Barcelona and the minimum wage is 1,300 a month, and in Ireland it's 2,146. The same can be said of many other countries you're going to draw a comparison to.
Yeah. And I could go on all day with these kind of comparisons. But some of the things, like I know we tax wine, for instance. So if you go in a wine producing country where there's very little tax on the wine, and you're looking at your total bill, it's going to be quite cheap. But you can also look at your steak, which might cost you €40 here and might cost you €15 there, and you're thinking, now hang on a second, we're exporting beef to the world. How come that element alone? I know it has to be cooked by an expensive chef and served by an expensive waiter, but still.
Pat, the ability of restaurateurs, and I'm sure Adrian will bear this out, the ability to put on a good fillet steak at a reasonable price is absolutely impossible in this country. Adrian, would you like to?
Yeah, well, what we've seen is that the fillet steak is going to be far and few between in terms of on menus, because it's too costly to purchase by the restaurant owner from the supplier. And then to make their margin, what they have to sell it at is probably prohibitive for some customers, and hence fillet steaks are coming off the menu and going for maybe a cheaper cut to provide a beef.
I'm just wondering if it's so expensive for the restaurant to buy it, and the farmers are complaining they make more money.
It seems to me that
Larry Goodman,
somebody in the middle is making a lot of money on this. But we are a high business cost country. So every SME, whether it's in hospitality, retail, manufacturing, everybody is in the same boat. Our cost of production, our cost of provision of a service has increased substantially over the last number of years, and it has increased in huge figures since the pandemic.
Okay, so what are we to do about it? Because if the country is flat at the moment in terms of bookings, it may be based on last year's experience, and they're saying, hang on a second, go there and it will cost you. It's good, the experience is good, but it'll cost you.
Well, I think as part of our promotion of Ireland as a destination for tourism, the 3 things is our people, our place and our product. And I think where we dial up the uniqueness about Ireland is around our people and our place. It's that extra customer service, that extra delivery in terms of quality of service when a tourist comes into the country, and the satisfaction rates. When you survey tourists leaving Ireland, there is a high degree of satisfaction among tourists in terms of, quality of food, quality of service in our country, and actually the scenery and
It brings me
environment.
to another point, though. You talk about Ireland of the welcomes, and whenever we do LSET broadcasts, we travel to hotels all over the place, and many of the staff are not Irish at all. They're brilliant, absolutely, sometimes far better in terms of their attitude at the table and so on, and their welcome at reception, but they're not Irish. Do you know, so many people, there is a labour shortage of skilled Irish people in the sector, is there not?
I'm 30 years working in the tourism and hospitality industry. We had this discussion 30 years ago when we had, as we described back then, the accession states into the European Union,
Yeah.
where people came here from those countries and worked in our hospitality industry. Now we have people working in our hospitality industry and many other industries, including our medical profession,
Sure.
from outside the European Union, and we're delighted to have them here.
No, but when you were talking, you were characterising the appeal of here as the distinctive Irish character and the nature of the welcome. If the people welcome you in many emporia, be they overnighting in a hotel or in a restaurant, are not Irish, you can't really use that as a selling point.
Well, I think when you look at the overall mix in terms of Irish and, let's say, non-Irish working in our hospitality, is about 25% to 30% of our overall workforce in hospitality, which means that at least 60% of our workforce is Irish working in our industry.
Now, Owen, looking at Ireland, as you look at many countries and you look at access costs to various countries, Ryanair have done obviously great work in lowering the access cost to many destinations. When the planes are relatively empty, when they're full, Ryanair is as expensive as the best in the world. How are we in terms of hotel prices, restaurant prices, access prices?
We can obsess a little bit about this, about all the issues that have just come up already. People coming to Ireland aren't generally chasing price. The access price, when they do chase price, tends to be what they look at. Decisions are sometimes made in the major markets that Ryanair operates. Ryanair is only 4% of Ryanair's entire business is Ireland, by the way. So they're huge in Britain and Spain and Italy. And people will look at a website and come to Dublin, not based on the hotel price, but on the access price for the airline. Now, they don't expect, there isn't an expectation of cheap prices. I think it was the great Austrian statesman Metternich that decided Europe was divided into beer drinking countries and wine producing countries, wine drinking countries. And you could draw a border right through the middle of Europe. And above to the north of that line, Ireland competes pretty much with what Scandinavia does, Germany does. South of that, we're really not in the same game that Spain and Portugal, that Irish people go on their own holidays to. In terms of eating out, access fares are really how we manage to make the money back for the tourists inbound. We're just on the first point, we're very dependent on four markets. Two of them are struggling to recover, France and Germany. Britain is very poor, and America saved our summer last year. So what I'll say about the low, what the hoteliers are experiencing is Americans traditionally don't travel in numbers in election year, and we're very dependent on them coming back. We're not anywhere.
Threatens to be a bad year.
We're not anywhere back to pre-pandemic levels in international aviation, Pat, and that is a bit of a problem if somebody like America doesn't pop up to save our summer like it did last year. They're the sort of but I was at Rendezvous France, the French tourism inbound. Two of the major sessions were about staffing issues, cost of business, the same things. When you go to a French hotel, it mightn't be a French person. We talk about the Colleen in the green dress that we need in the reception, but every other country is facing very similar sort of problems, and we can talk a lot, obsess a little bit about price, and we've been doing so for many, many years. The cost of the offering to the tourist in Ireland it isn't coming back to haunt us in cancellations. Our growth was there right up to the pandemic, despite the fact we were worried about cost. We always have to worry. We always have to worry about what our competitors, particularly the likes of Scotland, are doing. If we ride a couple of 10 or double-digit percentage points over the cost of an equivalent in Scotland, that's where we're going to start falling out of the business. But we're doing quite well, and we really we're dealing with a shared problem in the cost of doing business, and we really need to. I would support what Adrian's doing on the 9% VAT completely, because when we start imposing conditions upon ourselves that puts us out of our sync with our competitors, not Spain and Portugal, but the Scandinavian countries, Scotland, Northern Germany, places like that, that's really a known goal. We don't need to score.
Britain, of course, is teetering always on the brink of recession under the current government. It means prices are a bit depressed. They complain about the cost of living. But people going to Newry and so on will say, well, actually, my shopping basket, I can get a lot more bangs for my euro up there than I can down here.
That's good for Tourism Ireland that they have sort of 6 counties that are working to a different set of regulations, but they don't always favour cost of doing business in the north either. Britain, the British market inbound is a bit like Carlsberg, the old Carlsberg ad. It reaches bits that nobody else gets because they're a different type of client. They're not staying in the high yield hotels of 5 stars. They're going to the Midlands hotels that really, coach tours, elderly people coming through, and that's a very important market for parts of the country that don't get the high yield customers, and that's been suffering every year since Brexit, and it's not looking good for recovery.
And what about the presence of asylum seekers and Ukrainians in the hotel stock? Because a lot of the hotels took up those contracts because there's no business in the winter. There was business in the summer, but if you take up a contract, it might be gone for the entire year, including the tourist season.
Interestingly enough, there's been a benefit from that, which we've seen. We've seen quite a few hotels returning to the hospitality market that got the investment money out of housing Ukrainian and the other asylum seekers. The investment money that was needed and was very badly deprecated by the pandemic. So I wouldn't get too upset about the fact that hoteliers have used this as a source of revenue. All of them that I've spoken to have always talked about returning to the tourism business when that's done. We also had a couple of openings which helped alleviate the situation in Dublin and in Cork, and a very big hostel opening in Dublin which will help alleviate the situation at the budget end. It's about 12-13% of our beds are out on contract, and the biggest problem with them is it's not exactly proportional through the country. There are towns in the west of Ireland where a large proportion of the beds are out, and Adrian's members who would rely on the spillover, the downstream business from that are losing out.
Yeah, there's certain counties where you have a higher proportion of tourism accommodation displacement, like the likes of County Clare, which is up near 34%. Donegal is nearly 40% of tourist accommodation, and Kerry as well. So these counties, and what they need to be identified by the government as an issue in terms of a support package specifically for them. Unfortunately, the government has decided in their wisdom to give money to visitor attractions and activity centres, but forgot about the local coffee shop and the local pub and restaurant, who are a downstream business. So where is the joined up thinking there from the government? There's a Fáilte Ireland grant for those visitor attractions, but there's nothing for other businesses.
Yeah, and the question is, if you're going to these attractions,
where are you going to stay?
Where are you going to stay?
Absolutely.
Lorraine?
Yes, Pat, I agree that with what Eoghan says on the hotels who have had the buffer of having 100% occupancy. In our case as well, we're reinvesting some of that money into making sure our product is ready to transfer back into the hospitality sector when the time is over. When is it going to be over? Nobody knows. There's very little communication about what's the future hold for the Ukrainian refugees or for the hoteliers that are housing them. And I would welcome the government making some announcement, because people are feeling very unsure of themselves. The recent reduction in incoming Ukrainian refugees is as a result of the cutback in the offer for them. But the people who are here now are feeling very uncertain and uneasy, and they've lost the kind of highlights because of the Gaza war.
There's a very interesting thing came across for the budget traveller. I think it's from backpacker.com. And you mentioned a hostel, a big hostel that's opening up for the lower end of the market. And what they've done is they've taken out the cost of access to various cities. But the four I have, and this would include paying into one attraction, which could be a museum or whatever, and it would include food, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a treat, which could be a beer, transportation, 2 rides, and accommodation, a hostel accommodation. And Amsterdam comes in tops. Now this is forgetting about how you got there, and the cost per day is €118 to spend a day in Amsterdam. The cost in Dublin is €94 for a backpacker. The daily cost in Rome is 88, and the daily cost in Barcelona is €80. So the backpacker gets more bangs for their buck in Barcelona, certainly than they do in Dublin, and certainly than they do in Amsterdam.
It's very interesting when you look at the price of the pint is our gauge. Yeah. Everybody talks about when you look across Dublin, and particularly the very well publicised rise of the price of the pint in the pubs in Temple Bar. You can walk 500 metres and get a pint for €5 or $5.50, and you're paying nearly 10 in Temple Bar. The pubs that are charging the most are packed. So it's not really a price that people are making. The prices of running on the ground, once operating when you land in the city, aren't really a factor in people deciding to come to Dublin or not. They do expect Amsterdam, Copenhagen, Dublin to be around the same level. They do expect provincial cities in Spain to be at a much lower level. They'd be horrified if they were charged Dublin prices. But the way where we sit in international tourism, the expectation isn't that you're coming here for cheap deals.
Just an interesting aside, the National Leprechaun Museum in Dublin has been named the country's most boring attraction. Anyone been to it? No. You've been to a few attractions.
I've been to more boring attractions. I was at the Barbed Wire Museum in Oklahoma, so I can.
The Barbed Wire Museum. And the top attraction, by the way, is the Branson Scenic Railway in Missouri that took the number 1 spot, with the US occupying the top 7 spots for really attractive attractions. Some of the comments, and it's interesting, Dan here echoes something you said, Eoghan. My family has been in the food industry for years, and we've always made good money. But in the last 20 years, we can up our prices, and the higher the better. The more we seem to charge, the more people seem to think it's better. So that's the kind of the Temple Bar pint phenomenon.
Yeah, it's also that they don't just think it's better, they're coming back because it is delivering the quality. Our reputation for food is second. We're the 4th biggest beef exporter in the world. Oddly enough, other countries have built entire culinary reputations on our food. So, I wouldn't really worry about trying to market low-cost food to our tourists. When they're coming to Ireland, they see cattle in the field, they see the sheep out in the field, they see food being produced as it should be, in an environmentally and a humane way, and I wouldn't be chasing low cost on that.
But I wouldn't agree with that texture there, because by and large in the restaurant business you have to provide value for the customer, and
but the value can be ambience, detail, service, which allows people to charge more for the same grub.
Well, that's true, Pat, but I don't think that formula could work universally in the restaurant business. My great fear is that we're going to end up with fast food chains as an offer to the tourism sector, and that's not going to work. You could be in any country in the world to go to an international branded fast food chain, but Ireland has the unique offering, and I can tell you that the customer that's coming to Ireland is not prepared to pay unlimited amounts to have that experience. So as an operator, we're faced with the challenges of the high costs. You can cut down the portions a little bit. You can cut down your hours a little bit, but you can't continue to charge huge prices. And there's a level beyond which it becomes unviable. Let's say, for example, in one restaurant that I operate, the minimum wage increase alone cost us 85,000 this year. right? Add the increase in VAT to that and other increased costs of food. It just wipes out the profitability. So, you know, the contrast is we end up with less restaurants and a few charging a fortune, but the 9 million tourists need a broad spectrum of offers.
I wonder, Adrian, you might be able to help me here, how many of the restaurants are actually sort of professional, limited companies rather than family restaurants? Because the perception is in continental Europe, an awful lot of them are family run, so people do maybe all the extra hours that are required. They're not, you know, they're cooking themselves, so there's no really expensive chef in the kitchen. It's, you know, family run, family maintained.
To put an exact figure on what's the percentage, I wouldn't have that, but you know, you are correct. We have far more independent restaurant owners, independent coffee shop owners across the country. We're not like the United States, where it is predominantly brands across every town and street in the States. And we pride ourselves in the quality of our food and our offering.
I'll read you some of the text. My American friend, who was a regular visitor in the past, says she wouldn't come over again due to the fact that she'd be lucky to get a broom closet that she could afford in Dublin. The minimum wages are much lower in other European countries because housing is much cheaper and all social services are superior. Healthcare, childcare, welfare, benefits, etc. 2 nights in Wexford B&B, 2 dinners, €605. 7 nights all-inclusive Bodrum, €1,009. Would love to holiday at home, but it's unsustainable. That's from Paul.
Yes, but in Bodrum the minimum wage is about €500, Pat. So like you know, it's not apples and apples, it's apples and oranges.
Yeah, but people actually are not asking questions, are they? But to the waiting staff, how much are you earning? It's the experience.
No, but they do know. I would be conscious when I'm in Portugal, if I'm about to tip, I would know that person is on a minimum wage of about $4.50 an hour. But Pat, the bottom line is that Bodrum has a huge resource of people to draw from to come and work in their industry. Ireland is at full employment, and we do not have people we can call upon to come and work in our industry.
Another one, on behalf of my professional association, I made a bid to host an international conference here in Ireland. We lost the bid due to the costs. The conference committee objected to all of our costings, price of accommodation, food, site rental, etc. Our country is perceived as far too expensive by our international colleagues. Why is fillet steak so expensive? In world terms, Ireland is a beef superpower. It does not make sense. Perhaps the fillets are being produced exclusively for export. That's from Ed. Having just returned from Gran Canaria, where we, 2 adults and 2 teenagers, dined in good restaurants, having 3-course meals, bottled water and wine, around €120. We will not holiday in Ireland again, sadly. Incidentally, many of the staff there were not local. They were from various other countries. What about block booking in hotels? As you can't stay on a Saturday night, you have to stay Friday and Saturday. Really unfair to families that have to book large rooms if they just want to get away for the night. Sick pay is the biggest cost. It's another week's holiday which has to be covered by another person. Many of my 120 staff are putting it to their holiday. I'm French. I've lived in Ireland for 2 decades, welcoming family visits regularly. However, their trips are becoming less frequent due to the high cost of living here, despite them staying with me. So, Canary's own, what about that protest? Tour us out.
Not much to it from what I can see. Well publicised. There the 4 islands everyone can name plus La Gomera at 12 o'clock on Saturday, and it's there's been a reach out on social media to gather and protest against over tourism. One of that's the sort of movement we'd have seen in Dubrovnik, Barcelona, and Venice. But the Canary Islands very dependent on tourism. I wouldn't expect large numbers. I wouldn't expect any Irish people going away to even notice they were taking place.
Just one point on the comments that you're getting in. Irish people have suffered the winter of rain, and they need to get away to the sun.
Yeah.
And there happens to be times in the year you can go when the flights are cheaper and you can get accommodation that's reasonably priced. So really, we're talking about the people coming into Ireland, the 9 million visitors, are coming for a different thing. They're not coming to toast in the sun and to have air conditioning running at night in the hotel bedrooms. So frequently we get comments from people who can go to Barcelona and go to the Canaries and have a holiday at half the price they can have it here. Irish people do need to get away. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you are too. Every second day here, there's a shower every hour, and so really we're not comparing like with like.
Hey, Adrian, what is to be done? I mean, the 9% would be a help, but would it be a panacea for all ills, or are so many outfits still with warehouse debt, which will...
Yeah, well, the
close them down.
warehouse debt is there's a portion of our industry that are caught in the warehouse debt, and that has to be repaid from May onwards, and you will see more closures because of that. But the big issue for the food-led businesses is that 9% VAT rate. That would be a huge lifeline to our industry. Otherwise, you'll see more and more increase in closures. You know, when you benchmark this year against the height of the recession and the financial crash, we had 1 a day closing back then. Now we have 2 a day closing now.
Lorraine?
I agree that the 9% is essential, and I think Simon Harris could hit the ground running now and reverse the trend of restaurants closing. However, on the warehouse debt, I cleared my debt, and I think it would be unfair on people to get a debt holiday or a debt write-off.
Yeah, they're getting zero interest.
They're getting zero interest, which is fair enough, but I think a lot of small operations might close down and reopen again in order to avoid the warehouse debt, which I think would be very unfair on those businesses that have paid their debt.
I'm tired of hearing about the poor hotels and coffee shops alone. What about the retailers in those areas? They are also dependent on tourism to top up their income. The novelty shops, the tourist shops. Eoghan, as someone who's not a provider of these services, what's the solution to make sure that 2024 is a decent year for tourism? Is there anything that anyone can do?
Don't score any own goals, but things like VAT rates, manage the staffing and the permits for people coming in, try to get chefs, all of that. Remember, in the modern, diverse, wonderful world where people travel so much, homogenisation is the enemy. Every single one of Adrian's restaurants, the 2 a day that are closing down, is losing something distinctively Irish. We could end up in a situation where franchises and familiar names start taking over our provincial towns. That's not what we want to happen. We want people to feel they're in Ireland and in a particular county and in a particular part of Ireland by what they see and what they eat when they get there.
Hotelier Lorraine Sweeney, Eoghan Corry, travel journalist, Adrian Cummins, CEO of the Restaurants Association of Ireland. Thank you very much for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Pat.
Thank you.